Welcome to the first set of notes on Mesopotamia. We are going to look at Mesopotamia in a couple of small sections. When we study ancient civilizations, we are going to look at it using the GRAPES method, the GRAPES method. We're going to look at geography, religion, achievements, politics, which would be like government, economics, money, and social structure. Those are the six things that we're going to look at. We're going to kind of look at Mesopotamia in small chunks. We're going to look at geography today and all of geography. Then we'll look at religion and achievements all kind of at the same time. We'll look at politics and economics at the same time, and maybe even throw in social structure on that case. We're also with Mesopotamia going to look at Hammurabi's code for a very short amount of time, and we are going to do a timeline over the different civilizations that were in Mesopotamia. Now, to kind of give you a frame of reference here about Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia isn't necessarily a place, or it's not necessarily a civilization as it is a place. It's an area, which is why the geography of it is so important and why we're going to spend one set of notes itself on geography. So let's look at it. Hopefully you have your fill-in notes. Your fill-in notes should look like mine, with the exception of the fact that you just have one little line here. So you're going to erase that one line and you'll fill in with the words that pop up on the screen. So let's get started. Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is a region. It's an area that existed thousands and thousands of years ago. It doesn't exist anymore in the way that we think of it. Now there's countries that are there. There weren't countries back in the time of these ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia is located in an area known as the Fertile Crescent. Now, the Fertile Crescent was known like this because of its nutrient-rich soil. So this area, and we'll see why it's nutrient-rich here in a minute, but this area had really, really good soil. And when you can grow food and kind of establish yourself in an area, that's where civilizations pop up. Without it being able to farm or hunt, or hunting even is a little iffy. Mostly it's farming. When agriculture comes into play, when an area can be farmed, that's when civilizations tend to stick. You have more wandering civilizations when they're hunter-gatherers. They have to move with the herds of animals. But when you can plant things and grow things for your food, you're more likely to stay in one place. So that's how this civilization popped up, because of this nutrient-rich soil. The reason why the soil is so good is because it's located between two rivers. It's located between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Super, super important. Highlight, underline, make sure you guys know that, because that is going to be something that pops up on your test. I guarantee it. Most of this geography stuff will. The Tigris and the Euphrates are the two rivers. They literally kind of surround the outside of this area. And it's those two rivers that cause the soil to be so nutrient rich. So here's kind of a picture of what it looks like today. So you can kind of see, I don't know which river this is. I'm thinking this is the Euphrates, I think. I'm not sure. But it's just this long river that runs through, and you can see the remnants of old civilizations in this picture. Now, the reason why the soil was so good, I mean, the rivers are there, which is awesome, but why does that help the soil? Well, what happens is that these rivers would flood in the spring. So a lot of water would come, the rivers would flood, and that would bring this fertile soil for farming. When the rivers flooded, and it flooded pretty regularly, like they knew that in the springtime it was going to flood. Now, it could flood, it could be a disastrous flood where it like wipes everything out. It could have been an easy flood. Regardless, though, the flooding of this area is what brought this really nice, rich soil, and it happened in the spring. So living by the water has a lot of really big benefits. And you're going to see this a lot with ancient civilizations. Ancient civilizations always sprung up near bodies of water, whether they were rivers, the ocean, maybe sometimes lakes, but most of the time, or seas, I guess would be the better one, seas. But most of the time it was around rivers or oceans. And that's because water is a life source for humans. Living by the water means that we can get water for everyday living. Okay? If you need a drink of water, you can go down to the river. Hopefully you clean it first, but you can go down to the river and get water. You can get water for washing clothing or for cooking. You could get water just for in-house use. So needing that water was important. It also helps with trade. So we can trade things on the river. We can have a boat. We can put stuff on our boat and ship it down the river to different locations. This is a very big thing when we get into Egypt later in the year. And transportation, right? If you want to get from one city to the next, hopefully those cities are on the river. If they are, it's faster to take a boat than it is to walk or take a donkey. Remember, we're in an ancient civilization, which means that there are no cars, there are no airplanes. There aren't even like wagons at this point. Like if you are going somewhere, you're walking. The wheel actually being used in carts was invented in Mesopotamia, which we'll talk about when we get into achievements. But before this time, you were walking everywhere. So the river helped with transportation in that case. Very important information. So let me kind of give you an idea of where we're at. Okay, this would be Mesopotamia, or the Fertile Crescent, kind of in the middle of its civilization. 2500 BC is kind of in the middle of Mesopotamia, of the time that civilizations were there. Okay, so to kind of give you a frame of reference of where we're at, down here in the bottom right corner is Egypt. So if you think about where Egypt is in Africa. So this is Africa here in the bottom right. Mesopotamia itself actually is in Asia. This is the Mediterranean Sea. So here along the right side of the Mediterranean Sea would be where like Israel is. Turkey is up here. Greece is kind of on the other side of the Mediterranean over on the left. It's not in the map. But this is, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but this is like modern day, like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. We're in the Middle East, kind of, if you know where that's at. I guess you can see that over here, present day Persian Gulf. All right, so we have Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. You've maybe heard those words be used before when we were fighting wars over in the Middle East. So that's kind of where we are at. Now the Tigris and the Euphrates, looking at this here, the Euphrates is on the left, the Tigris is on the right. And they feed down into the Persian Gulf. But this water, or these rivers would flood, especially down here all of it would flood. But the weather here made a difference too. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Oh, there's a fly. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so there's Mesopotamia. The region in Mesopotamia is very, very large, okay? So the weather in different parts of Mesopotamia were very different. In the southern region, which would have been down by the Persian Gulf, it was much hotter and drier than the northern region. I mean, we're closer to the equator, and hopefully you know in science, the closer you are to the equator, the warmer the temperature is. So because it's farther down, even though it's closer to the Persian Gulf, it's warm and it's hot and it's dry down there. So they really needed irrigation systems and canals to get water where it needed to be. Water, it wasn't very plentiful with water. It was very hot, kind of desert-like. The northern region of Mesopotamia was a little bit cooler, not much cooler, but it wasn't nearly as hot or dry, so it didn't need these irrigation systems as much. They still needed them, but not as much as in the south. The south really needed them, otherwise they weren't getting any water. Canals brought water to the people for living and farming. So we have to be able to get water somehow, right? And we can't all live by the river. Eventually you run out of space on the river. So when these civilizations would pop up, they would bring in these irrigation systems. They'd bring in water to where it needed to go. And we'll talk about this more too when we talk about the city-state, which is what Mesopotamia is set up in. So like I said earlier, Mesopotamia is located in present-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Cyprus, Jordan, Palestine, and Kuwait. So it sounds like a lot of countries. Some of these countries, like Kuwait's not very big, Palestine's not very big, Jordan I don't think is very big either. Iraq's pretty good size, Syria's pretty good size. So they're it's a big region that covered this area here. Wherever the flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates could meet was part of this Fertile Crescent. So I want to show you here. If you need to pause to get these typed in, that's fine, but I'm going to keep rolling just so I don't run out of time on my video here. So here's what the present day looks like here. So we have Turkey up here, We have Israel, Palestine, we have Syria, Lebanon. So this is the, on the left here would be the Tigris, the Euphrates would be on the left, the Tigris would be on the right. So that's coming up from the Persian Gulf. And Iraq kind of made its borders around those two rivers. I think that's it for geography, yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of this and I'm going to show you some maps. Now, if you were in person, we'd be doing these maps in person, but obviously you aren't. So rather than having you like print these or anything, I'm just going to show this map to you with what the kids are doing in person here. Okay, so in this map, we have the Euphrates River is that one on the left. We have the Nile River down at the bottom. That'll be big when we get into Egypt. We don't need it quite yet, but that's kind of important to know that river there. And we have the Tigris River. The Euphrates and the Tigris are the most important. It's really important that you know those. So there they are again. Now we're going to look at some of the major cities here. There were 3 major cities in Mesopotamia that pop up very, very often. And they're all, if you look at where they're all located here right along the river. So we have Babylon, which you've maybe heard of Babylon before, especially if your family is Christian or you happen to be Christian. Babylon has been referenced in the Bible before. We are in that kind of same area. So we have Babylon, we have which I know is a super great name. We have and we have Uruk. So we have Uruk, and Babylon are those 3 major cities. Now, we have 4 different civilizations that popped up in this area, okay? And we're going to talk about them very, very briefly. When we do timelines, we'll plot them on the timeline so you can see. But I do want to show you, what's really cool about this is it shows you how the civilizations grew, okay? The first civilization to live in Mesopotamia was the civilization of Sumer, okay? Which is in that purple there. So you can see it encompasses Uruk, not quite Babylon. It didn't quite reach Babylon yet. Babylon wasn't a city-state yet in Mesopotamia. So we have Sumer, okay? The Sumer eventually was taken over by the Akkadian Empire. So the Akkadian Empire took over all of Sumer. So all of this purple and this little bit of pink here at the top, or orange I think it's supposed to be, is part of the Akkadian Empire. So that kind of like swallows up the next one. The next one is the Empire of Babylon, the Babylonians. Again, that might be a word that's familiar to you. And look at how big they grow. I mean, it goes all the way up. It includes all of this purple, all of this pink. It goes from the Persian Gulf all the way up to up this top here at the Euphrates. It doesn't encompass all of the area, but it does grow. Babylon's influence kind of comes and goes a little bit. We're not going to talk about it a whole lot, but it does kind of come and go. The Fertile Crescent is everything here in green. So if it's in green, it's considered part of the Fertile Crescent, which that's not a civilization, but I'm just giving you a frame of reference. The other civilization in Mesopotamia that's not on here is the Assyrians. Assyria was the other civilization. It fought with Babylon, but it's not on here. We're not going to look at those civilizations very much other than to kind of plot on a timeline where they fall. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is it for your notes. If you need to pause at any time, or if you need to go back and watch this video again, you can. Remember, you can pause it at any time to get words if you've missed something. I'm not going to check to make sure your notes are done. That's not, I don't have time for that. But it will hurt you if you don't take your notes because you're not going to do well on the test over this. And this, I mean, we took a latitude and longitude test. This is going to be your really first major test in social studies. So make sure you take the time to watch this video completely through, watch it again if you have to, and get those notes in because otherwise you're going to have some issues when you take the test later on. Okay? On that note, I will let you guys go. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye, guys.